Harry Potter is a series I have a lot of feelings about. I find the characters and most of the world charming, and a lot of my love for the franchise is rooted in my nostalgia, because the more I read the books, the more I find I don't care for. Chief among them is this trend I've seen bad writers doing, where they make a small-time antagonist character that then has some kind of redemption that is either just limp or actively fucking ruined because childhood spite or whatever. Man, she deserves better. Draco Malfoy is the Chloe Bourgeois of Harry Potter, but unlike Chloe, Draco had well over a decade of being written and fan interpretation / reaction taken into account when the later books were being published, which allowed Rowling to steer into a sort of no-win scenario when it came to ending the series. See, she had some kind of idea where she wanted to take certain characters and tie up the loose threads within everybody got married and had babies shaped bow. But it still leaves a lot to be desired, simply due to the fact that a lot could have been changed given hindsight, and in fact would have made things even better if we were allowed to change things. So that's what I'm doing. Now, I'm not an idiot, you're not an idiot, you've seen the thumbnail, we're making Drarry canon. But I need to make something abundantly clear before we get started. Draco Malfoy, as he appears in the series currently, is a racist, is a bully, and is directly hostile to our main characters, and that is not okay for shipping fuel in any capacity. Full stop. What I am doing in this thought experiment is taking Draco as he starts in the series from his first appearance and working from there. We aren't changing his backstory, although we are going to change a few other people's, we'll get there. And we aren't changing key events, just why they happen or really who does them. This is a rewrite of the series on my terms. This Draco, my Draco, is a much different creature than the one from the books or even the films, so before you get all up in arms, just hear me out. Alright, let's begin. So first off, we need to address the main character. Mr. Potter is now no longer under the dysfunctional watchful eye of his aunt and uncle. While they can be part of the story if you like, it doesn't really make any sense for Harry to be sent to the Dursleys in any conceivable way, and there's a couple reasons for that. Point the first is that the person dropping him off is Dumbledore, the only person who Voldemort fears and is presumed to be dead. If he took in Harry, who's gonna fucking try and take him? And even if he lives at the school, a live-in nanny would be more than fine in my mind, not to mention that it would make the little break Albus gives Harry in Book 5 be even more heart-wrenching. The movies and books sort of portray them as a slowly growing bond of that of a grandfather and his grandson, so that dynamic being shaken up and disturbed more so than it is in the book makes complete sense to me, and adds to all the damn teen angst that book had. Don't come for me, Order of the Phoenix is my favorite. Point number 2 is that Sirius Black exists in the first book, and is his fucking godfather. Now, I know what you're all thinking. He's a wealthy, semi-famous wizard. Harry needed to be humbled when he grew up. First of all, he's a child, not a fucking celebrity. He's just a kid. You can teach him how to deal with that stuff, and Sirius isn't a blood relative, so he couldn't protect him. First of all, Sirius is the black sheep of his family, so he probably would have kept Harry in check. In the series proper, he sees Harry as a replacement for James, and that is the last thing he hears from him alive, so having him grow up with him makes vastly more sense to make it so that he won't see that, and more understand that Harry is his own person. That line in his death can happen the same way, but now it can be a bittersweet thing. To have his dad actually say he sees his father in him, and it, instead of being a horrifying note, is now more stamp of approval. Oh, and the fact that Dumbledore got Snape off for good behavior for being a known Death Eater and couldn't get Sirius off for crimes he had no way of committing is bullshit. So we're changing it. You also have truth serum in this universe that no one thought to give this man on trial. It's dumb and stupid, and I hate it. Point number 3. What does Harry being abused and treated like a vile thing to be hated, only to find out that he's actually a chosen one hero destined for greatness and getting to go to a wizard school add to the story? A sense of wonder? Sure, but in reality it doesn't have a whole lot of value when you consider his whole unhappy childhood doesn't leave him with anything to overcome besides maybe a lack of foresight on how poor his friend is when compared to him. Anyway, what all of this does is that it doesn't change Harry in any way because the scars and trauma that should be there from a life of mistreatment are just not a factor in Harry. Sure, he's not used to gifts and is amazed at anything remotely magical, but that can still be a thing. I mean, I'm in my mid-20s and seeing the sky outside a plain window still makes me get all doe-eyed and toothy grinned. Why? Because shit like that, no matter how normal it is to some people, will still seem interesting to someone, and that can be your main character, especially if given the changes I've made thus far, his guardians are trying to give him a normal life. Speaking of which, the Weasleys are no longer destitute. They can still be middle class, but Arthur works for the government, and works a lot of hours from what I can surmise. When we enter the story, Bill and Charlie are gone and Percy is on his way out, so by book 3, only 4 kids are living there, and all of them are at school for 10 months months of the year. How in the fuck are they this poor? Does Molly not work? And if not, why? Sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent. The other thing I need to mention is that everyone is now no longer straight. Okay, well, maybe Ginny, but that's because every friend group needs that one straight friend that's on thin ice. Dean and Seamus are now a couple, and because they both date Ginny at one point, I'm just gonna make them a polycule because yes, and a rather clingy one at that, because why not? Ron is now bi, Harry is pan, Hermione is demi-romantic but heterosexual, Fred is aro, George is ace, Cho Chang is trans, so is Lee Jordan while we're at it, Luna is non-binary, and Draco is gay. And yes, before you ask, this is necessary, because the series is so homogenized with white straight people that making the whole cast reflect people who needed this shit growing up the most and actually benefited from the world that was made is a good thing, damn it. And making new side characters that will feel tacked on doesn't fix the issue. Adapting the characters to be a different sexuality is a much better idea because we already like these fuckers and we want to see them go through something different at this point. With that mini rant out of the way, let's get on with the show. Alright, so, as stated above, Draco's first interactions in the book and even the second one are the same with Harry. The difference is Draco's reaction. In the book, he's basically like, well, don't let the riffraff rub off on you, and then the book moves on. Draco has probably never been told no before, especially by someone he tried to get in his pocket. And while I understand the reaction the book has, I think a far more interesting one is where he sits there and thinks on it for a while. It festers and gets under his skin as if he can't decide what to do next. And then the book moves on for a while. Now, I need to add something here. Draco is still a pompous, spoiled kid. I'm not changing who he is when he gets there. It's what his interactions with our trio does to him. It gets him out of that Slytherin bubble the series likes to perpetuate so much. So the book keeps going and then they all get caught moving the dragon. This time though, Draco just saw them going out and wanted to see what was happening. So followed them and then bumped into McGonagall, who then found the other three. They just assumed he told her rather than her independently finding the four of them. The forest scene is actually one I think would be the most interesting to rewrite, since Harry at this point still thinks of Draco as a bully, and to be fair, he has been to this point. So Draco being Draco, he starts boasting and saying snide things because he doesn't know how else to be. His parents are rather wealthy, well-off white people in the upper echelons of wizard society. I don't think he's learned how to not be a bit of a prat yet, and Harry just calls him out on his bullshit, again, making him shut down for a second. This is the first major departure for Draco though. He kinda looks at Harry and then says, "You're right, I'm sorry, can we start over?" And genuinely means it. Now, Harry, in any of the three versions of this kid we have to pick from, says yes, but for different reasons. The Dursley version is due to him simply knowing a sincere from insincere apology when he hears it, so gives him a chance. In the Dumbledore universe, he says yes because he believes in the good in people, and in the serious version, he says yes because, at the end of the day, he hasn't done anything terrible, and he can always try to help break some of those old mentalities his godfather has explained to him throughout his life. From there, book one mostly goes ahead without any interruptions, save anytime Draco interferes from this point on, and instead add in a scene or two of them having potions together so Ron and Hermione can work together, or maybe they all four have lunch some days, stuff like that. In book one, it's not so much a real personal thing, so swapping out Draco for Crabbe and Goyle or even Blaise, Pansy, or Marcus Flint, you know that guy that tried to kill Harry in his first ever Quidditch match? Yeah, that guy? It's fine by me. Personally, I think adding Malfoy to Team Protag and making Pansy and Marcus with Crabbe and Goyle their own dark mirror version of our gang would be interesting, especially if Pansy was the leader and Marcus was the second in command, while the Tweedles were more or less unchanged by being walls of meat for the punchies. The other thing this frees up is giving us more named Slytherin characters that allows us to give more depth to the house and free Draco of being a bully and can be more easily a checking one's privilege or learning that you can't just say shit and expect it to not hurt people kind of thing, which in all honesty this series needs. So going on from book 2, I want there to be more of a give and take. Draco still gets on the sports team opposite to Harry, and they have a more friendly rivalry, but instead of him being the one to call Hermione a mudblood, it's Marcus. And the problem for Draco is that he didn't say anything in defense of his friend. Much like Harry, he's kinda clueless as to why it's a problem. More so in this context, I think it's because no one told him what it means, or if you want, you could have everyone but Hermione know, and Harry actively explains to him why it's a problem. This will lead to a really nice scene of Draco sitting down and apologizing to her, not on behalf of Marcus, but for his own lack of action, a common thing we'll see going forward, and ignorance to the situation. This could even tie into the heir of Slytherin thing in the book. They need to ask him, but due to Hermione's hesitancy with the whole lack of action thing, she's probably not going to want to talk to him directly for fear of lying, so Polyjuice Potion is still able to be in the story. See what I mean? The why but not the how is all I'm changing here. After that, book 2 seems more or less to be okay, although I'd nix the part about Lucius trying to kill Harry since that A, wouldn't have worked to begin with, and B, just wouldn't have made any sense. Also, Draco and Harry do that thing that all sports couples do when they're on opposing teams, where they're all business on the field and give each other nicknames like Scarhead and Slickback to get their blood boiling a little bit, but off the field, they're the most achillic motherfuckers in the room. And I love that. So yeah, book 2, it's pretty much unchanged. However, I am adding this thing where Ron and Harry start to maybe have a thing with one another, but then realize that, nah, they're more brotherly than boyfriendy. And that's a thing that happens all the time. Just because you both like the same gender doesn't mean you can't be friends. Hell, that's how I met my best friend. Book 3, though, is where things get a lot more interesting. From this book onward, Draco becomes less of a presence in the main narrative. He mostly existed to annoy Harry, but now that's what Pansy's party is for. So now I want to inflate Draco's time by having him be more involved with the story, if not the plot. I want him to be more in the group. 2 years is enough time to establish this, and we can just have him be there wholesale. This is also where Harry and Draco start dating. In books 1 and 2, I mentioned big character departure moments for him, but I wanted to add in bits of them kind of blushing and flirting a little, so that by Christmas in year 3, they're just comfortable enough to go to each other's common rooms and even on some weekends, sleep together. And by that I mean actually sleep. They're fucking 13, I'm not going there with this, you pervs. I also want them to be a thing before the book ends, so like right before the climax. I haven't really thought of a way to change the Prisoner of Azkaban other than just swapping Sirius for Bellatrix so that she's introduced earlier, and while she's not tied to any of the personal shit going on, she is a little crazy and probably bored, or wants revenge on Pettigrew for being the reason her master was destroyed. You can finagle this in any way you want so that it's not as contrived as it comes up in the books. And the only reason they have to go back and fix stuff is that Pettigrew and Bellatrix got away and that Buckbeak is dead, which, I mean, come on. Oh, that reminds me, I actually don't mind keeping Draco to be the one hurt by him still. Just instead of running up to it, he was a bit too quick and nervous, and so that scared the burb and caused him to get scratched. This could also lead to a really cute scene where Harry tries to fix the situation by taking Draco to see Buckbeak and getting the two to get along, and even has Draco get on for a fly around the castle. And of course Draco is terrified, but Harry's behind him so he won't fall off, and this is the scene where they get together. Harry might also tease him like, come on, you ride a broom almost as well as I do, and this big old softie is scaring you? And Draco gets all blushy and annoyed like, yeah, well at least the broom can't knock me off if it gets mad. Little things like that. Book 4 starts and the two are now dating. Harry even springs to get Draco a phone that has a glamour charm placed on it so that it looks like a book or an object the rest of the family wouldn't really notice, so that they can talk over the summer since his parents suck, and to be honest, the boys don't really want to deal with it. The Black family or Dumbledore wouldn't really care, and if Harry's with the Dursleys, they have no idea he's got money, so transferring it to pounds and mailing him a phone would be pretty easy. That's another thing. In this version, we're getting rid of the whole magical muggle separation thing, and in Hogwarts, there's TVs and game stations and cell phones. In my head, this is taking place during current day. There is no way in hell wizards are not going to be on the pulse of pop culture, and muggle-born witches and wizards who don't like to read or just kind of want to zone out for a bit should be allowed to. So fuck it, we're gentrifying Hogwarts. Anyway, the two spend all summer being 14 and texting each other, and even manage to send each other gifts for their birthdays. Harry sends him something small and personal like a pin or a small trinket they saw in Hogsmeade in the spring, and Draco sends him a lot of expensive clothes and stuff, but Harry's favorite one was, ironically, one Draco didn't think Harry would like all that much since it was the cheapest one, and the one Draco handpicked rather than having someone else buy them like the rest of them. Like a picture of them, something that has meaning but isn't something Draco is used to doing, and so overcompensated just in case. And that's pretty much them throughout the book. They're just a really happy, healthy couple that deals with the bullshit this book has as best they can. From the tiff with Ron, to the rumors, to the actual danger, and rather than Hermione getting photographed with him, it's Draco, and this will come up later, I promise you that. I also think it'd be pretty cute to have these two be stubborn to ask each other to the Yule Ball, rather than just assuming Draco would even want to go or stay for Christmas, since his family usually does stuff. That, or he just wanted to be asked and Harry's like, you're my boyfriend, of course we're going together, and if I have to ask, so do you. God, I love writing dumb arguments like that. It's no stakes, but you get to see how people pick fights, and it's interesting. Another thing that needs to be addressed is that Draco's family are still going to be themselves, and of course I wouldn't put it past the Malfoys to be vehemently homophobic, and if they aren't, they'd be more upset that he's dating Harry Potter. What this does is adds more friction between him and his parents that would give Harry some good chances to show empathy and help him through some tough nights. That or just be a nice scene of them being emotionally raw with one another. Something to mention is that while Draco is desperately happy with Harry, he's not super keen on making it public outside the student body, and even then he's careful around other Slytherin students, for fear of them telling their parents and them telling his parents, so he keeps it under wraps as best he can, and Harry gets that. Being the chosen one and the boy who lived, he's not exactly adverse to keeping one aspect of his life to himself for once at this place. This leads me to the end of the book, where Cedric is dead and Baldy is back, and while Draco is comforting Harry through the traumatic event, he's a little stiff and reserved, like he's thinking about something, ending on a still happy note, but one that needs some paying off later. Also, don't kill Barty Crouch Jr., you legit had a cool idea to have a sort of henchman in parallel to his father for later books, and you just killed him off. We got David fucking Tennant for what, all of 7 minutes of screen time? No, that does not fly, pun not intended. Bad series, bad. Book 5. So this is my favorite book, and I like a lot of things in it, but I still have some stuff to change. First off, Draco is now on board with Hermione's house elf anti-slavery movement, which also, we're changing the name from Spew to Help, the House Elf Liberation Party, because, you know, they're here to help. Also, fuck you, Rowling. While Draco isn't immediately on board with it, given the time he spent with these three and the fact he learned to stop being racist against Muggleborns, he's more easily swayed to also understand enslavement and why it's bad, which the group on the whole now works towards outside of Umbridge's annoyances, and Hermione is placed in the right for doing this rather than being perceived as shrill or naive about the whole thing. Seriously, what the fuck was up with that? Secondly, Draco is a bit more on edge, and throughout the year, becomes more distant from Harry because of his home life and problems now that his family has seen that photo Rita took of them back in the second task the year prior, compounded with the trouble with Snape. So Snape is seen into Harry's mind and found out they're dating, and when Harry backfired the spell on Snape like in the movie, or even went into the pensive, I don't really care, he's infuriated and out of spite tells Lucius because he's a dick. However, and this has to be stated as best I can, through all of this, Draco is still a helpful main character. For example, he joins Umbridge's screed against the school so that he can look out for Harry and let him know if they're on patrol or if they're going to be a raid or something. Along with that, Dumbledore's army has rando Slytherin students who want to actually learn magic rather than just read about it because that's actually what their house is about, furthering the understanding and practice of magic. I'm honestly surprised it's not like Ravenclaws that are in that group of hers, seeing as they're all about book learning and studies and things like that. Practical magic wouldn't occur to most Ravenclaws, but I'm digressing. From there, the book largely stays the same. Draco does end up going to the Ministry with them though, and I like this idea a lot because he now has to fucking nut up and face his father head on. But the only problem is that he can't. Like I said before, Draco's big problem is his lack of actual action in things. He can talk a big game, but he's not super confident in his abilities or presence, so buckles under his father. He still sides with Harry, but he doesn't fight Lucius, and in fact, the only thing he can muster to do is grab Harry's hand for support, which is what allows him to speak in front of him at all. This leads me to the Veil of Death scene. I'm torn here because I already talked about it earlier, but what I think is better is that if we keep it as I described it, compounded with my rewrite of Azkaban, then Bellatrix being the one to kill Sirius becomes this much more personal thing that we can tie into the endings of books 6 and 7. It makes this whole thing more of an interesting dynamic since in the original canon, she's just kind of a random third act Hail Mary to be a threat. She's the Harley to Voldemort's Joker, hopelessly devoted to the psychopath who pays her absolutely no mind and only uses her when it's convenient, and I think making her Robin turned Nightwing turned effective Batman in this series kinda adds up, rather than just being some named goon someone else gets to take out so that Harry only has one body on his count. Or you can make her a threat they both share, or that Draco just hates his aunt for the way she treats him and his parents both before and after the Ministry scuffle, and what she's done to his boyfriend's dad. It'd be so much more interesting this way. Why is she so bad at writing things? This, regrettably, leads me to a sad thing though. Well, sadder than Sirius dying if at all possible. But at the end of the book, after Harry has been consoled and the immediate shock has worn off, Draco breaks up with him. Okay, so this and book 7 are the reason this video even came into being in the first place. The rest of this was building up the relationship in your mind and making these two fuckers make sense, more or less as they are. To kick off this relationship and heartbreak Harry is feeling leads him to thinking Draco is a Death Eater, because why else would he suddenly break up with him and look paler and more depressed than ever? He's trying to protect Harry, and by having it be so that they're no longer a thing, Voldemort can't use him to get to Harry, since he has about as much understanding about love as a rock. Now, the man isn't stupid, he just thinks using one's heart to get to them isn't as smart as just trying to kill them. The anti-Xehanort, if you will. And yes, I will find a way to drag the series into anything, don't test me. Anyway, what this does is explain away why Harry's friends don't believe him when he says Draco is a Death Eater, because in the books it kinda comes off as a plot contrivance since they know his parents are Death Eaters and they know Voldemort's alive and kicking, so I don't get this hand waving. I just never understood it. Adding in the heartbreak makes sense, and given that the year prior Draco was a little standoffish while still being in the group, they simply chalk it up to him not being able to let go of the relationship. This also would, I don't know, allow Dumbledore to talk to Harry about relationship stuff. This whole book, at its core, is centered on adding more context to his and Harry's mentor-mentee relationship, so that we care when he dies at the end. You'd think them talking about boys would be a good icebreaker topic in one of their sessions, or even just if they had a lunch while discussing the memories. He already brings it up in the movie about if Harry likes Hermione, and I think it's in the book to some degree, so adding this commonality would lead to more conversations about it. Not to mention him being one of the only other non-straight people to have a somewhat third-person perspective on all of this would be good to see. Also, the scene with Sectum Sempra is now going to have a tag-along. Goyle is going to be the one hit by it because he's the one who initiated the duel with Harry, and Draco is just begging him to leave. So that whole scene still happens, it just adds a bit of red to Harry's ledger in exchange for the ending Draco gets in this book. Harry spends the whole year obsessing only to be proven right, and at the end we get the tower scene. I want this to mean something. So in the original sequence of events, all we really get is that Draco has to do this because he was ordered to, and Harry kinda just never comments on it. He never really has an internal discussion with it, and it's always bothered me. I'd like him to talk to his friends about it since Dumbledore is... well, he's not doing so hot at the moment. He can't really talk to Draco because they've already escaped, so they can't really have time for that. A longing look across the burning field? Absolutely. Just not talk. Book 7 is, again, mostly unchanged, given that Draco isn't present for 95% of it. I do think having a scene of how his life's been during this year could be very interesting, or even if there was a show adaptation, an episode seeing events from his perspective would be super compelling. The 4 scenes I want to touch on are the one at Malfoy Manor, the one in the forest, the one in the courtyard, and one after everything is all said and done. So obviously the scene in the manor is going to be similar, but I want there to be this look in their eyes. Harry a pleading one, and Draco a more searching/thinking one, where he's trying to figure out how to explain to him that he knows who he is without telling everyone in the room, especially the dangerous ones. The only thing I can think of is a nickname or something made up, like Lightning Bug or something cute like that, saying stuff like, "That's not my lightning bug," and looking away so that he won't cry, but Harry getting it, showing that there's still heart there and that when this is all said and done, they can try to figure this out. Scene number 2 is that of the forest. See, in the book, the Malfoys are looking for Draco, and Narcissa gets Harry to tell her if Draco is alive in exchange for bullshitting Voldemort. And I like that a lot. It's a good scene, the tension works, and it's well crafted. However, the big change I want to make is that Draco is here in the forest, and instead of asking if Harry knows whether or not he's alive, she asks if he still loves him, which, when you get right down to it, is what the Malfoys care about. Not love in its purest form, but themselves. So Narcissa asking this means that if this one person is what makes her son happy, then fuck her husband's boss. He's not exactly high on her priority list, especially after trying to force him to kill a man at the ripe old age of 16. In the courtyard thereafter, I want this scene that has been floating around the movie's cutting room floor and even people's headcanons to become actual canon, in where Malfoy throws Harry his wand. I didn't mention this earlier, but the little scuffle in the manor happens, but rather than Harry getting Draco's wand, he just gets the other 2. If my memory serves me correctly, they have at least 2 other wands to work with, and so Draco having his original wand and giving it to Harry would pass ownership to him, especially if the passage about Hawthorn wands is true. This also applies to the Elder Wand, since Harry technically beat Draco that night, so it still belongs to Harry all this time. It's just that now he gets Draco's OG wand as well. And lastly, there's when everything's done. The bitches Thanos snapped away, the dust has settled, the Malfoys all have a cry together, and everyone is mourning the newly dead and the old dead. But Harry and Draco sneak off and have a talk. They have a really big, long conversation about apologizing and crying and saying everything they wish they could have said for the past years, all in service of getting their feelings out. Harry even repairs his wand with the Elder One and gives Draco back his, signifying that everything is as it should be. And the two get back together. They have a life together, they adopt some kids, and even have a surrogate if they wanted. I have no idea what names they give these kids because the names they did pick in the book are stupid, and Snape deserves his own discussion and rewrite, but as he currently stands, he is not worth a middle name of one of Harry's kids. I will say, I'm cool with Pansy and Marcus having kids and chilling out over time, even making amends later in life, showing that bullies can get better. I'd like to think Scorpio would be their kid in this, or Draco really liked the name and wanted one of his sons to have it. I don't really care either way. But overall, they lived happy, full lives. And don't even get me started on the cursed child, this thing is already long enough as it is. So yeah, that's my rewrite of Draco and Harry to make them make sense in this framework. Is it perfect? No. Does it work? Mostly, I think yeah. Draco is a character that is so integral to the story that removing him entirely doesn't work, but he's such a nothing character at the same time, to the point that his redemption arc is so off-screen that it doesn't work. It's the Diamond Tiara effect, where suddenly we're supposed to care about the schoolyard bully having his own problems, when in reality he just needs to be kicked hard, which is why I wrote him to begin with. I wanted his ending to make sense, so I worked backwards from the idea of making the ending more coherent on his end. Also, I'm a big gay sap and wanted more gay rep in the series I grew up with and wanted to flex my writing brain a little bit, and accidentally wrote a 6,000 word essay on why this could work. My bad. I hope you all enjoyed this. I've been trying to be more creative these days and give my takes on how I'd like things to be done if given the choice. With that said though, my name is Chris, let me know your hot takes on this in the comments, and I hope you all have a fractastic day.